Cen X, real talk
at the heart of your community.
New journey, Centric Podcasts. I'm here with Dr. Shaun Danquah, founder of Centric. And yeah, exciting times.
Very exciting.
Start of a new journey, another way to disseminate the knowledge. So yeah, for you, Centric, how did it come about? And what did it take to get it to this stage?
Well, I think, with anything, it's always important. One goes back to the foundation, the root, And I grew up in the 80s, where poverty was at its height. There wasn't many opportunities. I grew up in I suppose what you call a socially deprived household. But as I always say to people, although we were financially hard up, I was intellectually privileged, because my mother was an Irish feminist and my father was a jazz musician. So there was always a combination of good music and politics going on. So regardless of the poverty that was going on around me, the household, there was a lot of kind of knowledge to kind of attain, absorb. And I suppose in a way, not being arrogant, it kind of put me at a slight advantage with those around me, because I was in the ghetto, but I was intellectualized. Mm-hmm. I had an intellectual outlook on what was going on around me. I was therefore able to kind of almost break situations down and understand them for what they were, not just what they was.
Would you say what you've experienced then as a child has massively affected you now, you as a person now, and what you do?
100%, because, it helped me, or should I say, from a very early age, I was able to create and develop a critical mind. I didn't take what was in front of me for granted. I always questioned things. Sometimes in the wrong way, starting out as you do, but then growing up in a more constructive way. So I would say I had a foundation of being a critical thinker very early on. I've been a critical thinker early on. So from having that foundation of African politics, Irish politics, growing up in a particular environment, it helped me to kind of create a critical foundation. So I didn't take things for face value. I would question things. I would want to understand things. I wasn't convinced that my situation was my situation. I always wanted to understand the underlying theory. Yeah. So later on, when we start to talk about Centric, it starts to become apparent, why Centric is the way it is. Being not just a research company, but also a way of cultural knowledge production and putting that power in the hands of the people, because who knows better than those who have lived it. So that's part of the that's the early start. And as I say, foundation's important. It helps something stand, or it can be part of why something may fall.
I understand that, and so from that, it seems like you had a good foundation, and for you to get to where you are. So how has that led to you now being the founder of Centric?
Because I think, like most people who grow up in those environments, you fall into particular potholes, police, doing this, doing that, jail, this, that. You start to realise that there's a wider play. There's a wider play at hand, and you want to kind of start to understand that play. And part of that comes from knowledge, and knowledge firstly of oneself, but also of the producing knowledge, being a producer of knowledge, the dissemination of knowledge, etc. So research for me, being someone that was critical, was always key. And I didn't really get on in the actual current education system, expelled from school, pupil referral units, etc. But I was always clever, I was always smart. And as I say, always question things. So I suppose, in a way, wanted to build an organisation that would also ask the same questions, but in a kind of a legitimate way. I was fortunate to get an education, but again, went about it in a very unconventional way. I'd done an access course in a community centre because it was located in an area that I grew up in. It was done in a way which was accessible, more conducive, more attractive to people like myself. And when I got to uni, I never really looked back. I'd done my degree, I'd done in politics and social policy. I'd done a master's in public policy. and I had all that lived experience. So I kind of combined the two, and kind of wanted to go out into the world and do something, you know, quite different. And then when finishing university, I worked on a community project called the Clapham Park NDC, which is all about engaging with residents. It was in Brixton Hill. Brixton received £56 million to regenerate a community. But then, even then I became quite frustrated because all this money that was allocated, we still wasn't giving it out to the right people. We were just project managing contracts to give to organisations that already had money. So me, given the background I had, based on the foundation we've just discussed, I questioned. And I suppose at that time, well, I became quite disruptive because I didn't understand why this 56 million had landed, but the people that needed it weren't getting it. So their explanation or their excuse at that time was that these people don't know how to monitor and evaluate, they don't understand financial regulations, they don't understand how to manage projects. So my thing was, if we know how to do that, why don't we give the community the money to do what they do best, and we can manage that? And that was the origin of what's called the Community Anchor, which then received £2 million from Lambeth Council, and they took that as an exit strategy to move forward. And that's when I started to realise that this whole funding allocation, who gets what, where things go, is not quite what it seems. And it became very obvious to me that if the community are not at the forefront of the agenda, the projects are not authentic. So when I got into research and got, fortunate to do a PhD, again, it became even more clear that although these people are obsessed with academic rigour, theory, frameworks, they weren't good at dealing with people, engaging people. So when leaving the PhD, completing the PhD, I wanted to set up a community research model that looked at academic rigour, but also looked at community insight. Because for me, the combination of the two was where the real power and kind of value lied, and that was about for Centric. That's how it started. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
For you though, so you're saying like when at the secondary school, for example, just going back, you got expelled and things like that, and you didn't like get on with the educational system. So how do you then go from that to masters, degrees, PhDs? Because
I think let's go back to the foundation. The foundation I was from foundation. Remember at the time, 80s, Thatcher, Reagan, black politics, African philosophy. As I said, I grew up in a household which was financially hard up, but we were intellectually privileged. Yeah, we were intellectually privileged. Yeah, there wasn't a bit of knowledge, there wasn't a social issue that went by that house or the family's house that we wasn't involved in, didn't know about. So even when one came or became involved in criminality, it was in criminality as a resistance to. I was extremely political. I was extremely intellectualized based upon my surroundings. So going into education later on wasn't really a shock. That kind of level of education was going on in the household, in the family's household, regular. So it was just Centric is almost an extension of that foundation. Yeah? We grew up in a situation where prominent, confident, African individuals were pushing forward points. And that's why I wanted to do the same thing with Centric. And that's why I was talking about putting people at the forefront of the agenda. People who've got the lived experience, people who understand the pain of a lot of these social issues that we kind of see today. Because as I always said, and I think I've mentioned it, who knows better than those who have lived it? Yeah, and it's really important that, as we go along as a society, we stop looking at things like qualifications are important. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the only thing, and I think we've become obsessed with the qualification of, rather than the lived experience of the individual. And what I try to do at Centric is really, I suppose, harness and push the importance of the lived experience. Those who have got the lived reality of the locale, of the ghetto, of the inner city, to kind of really push forward these research agendas in the right way. So Centric, as I always say, it's not a program, it's a movement. It's about rethinking research, reimagining research, because it was quite clear on the back of COVID and the magnification of inequalities compounded by George Floyd that there's something wasn't quite right in the system for people of colour. And Centric couldn't have landed at a better time when the world was asking questions, and there's almost like a calling for something new.
You felt that was it?
That was it. That was it. Because to be honest with you, and we've covered it, I mean, you've probably covered this, social media's covered this, but I was impacted by that situation with that brother that got killed. I watch those screams, I watch those cries, but I've seen them screams and then cries many times in different ways. Yeah? So it kind of, I wanted to build a project prior to that, but that just put me on acceleration mode. The project had to start tomorrow. I was working for an organization that I was meant to spin out of. After watching that and being around particular individuals, I had to drag it out. People talk about spin out. It was a rip out because I could not be positioned in an organization that didn't share my values.
So you made your own.
I made my own, and we learned as we went along. Startup culture.
Like that. So Centric started, and you spoke about how the reasons why and behind it. So when Centric say let's go first month, 3 months, what did it look like?
Oh dear, it was a mess because we racked it. It's like moving out of a house that you're meant to. It's like if you've just had to come out of place rather than moving out. You still left your pajamas or you still left underwear in the place you need to go back and get. So we just learnt on the job. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't have changed it any other way because I think it's the mess and the disruptiveness and that made it what it was. Because we wanted to do something different, and I'm always suspicious if you're trying to make a change. I'm always, when things look too familiar in the process of change, I'm always suspicious. Yeah, because what we didn't want to do is replicate a template that failed our people, and I was being pushed and forced by the system to follow this guideline. But I had to ask myself the question: this guideline that you're pushing hasn't done anything for my people; it's served you. So what am I following? So we made up our rules as we went along, but we kept it legit. And I brought people into place that weren't qualified but had the hunger and had the stomach, because skills are easy to develop, but character's hard to find. So we built this organisation based upon not the usual power criteria, but on a criteria that we'd usually find out there in the streets, where you're looking for individuals that have got the stomach, the confidence, the strength to kind of be behind you. Because we're saying rethinking research. That's disrupting, dismantling, wobbling a system. It's wobbling tradition. So we had to look at ways that were effective and impactful. So we developed things like, for example, publishing literature reviews which spoke to community insight, but were compounded with academic rigor. Just hitting the system with the facts and the stats. Hitting the system with the issues and the evidence. Yeah, and the system really started to kind of, take us on board, and from we just grew. Mission one was, because it was COVID, we went out there and done a 18-month intel gathering exercise to understand how people were surviving, how people were getting on. We were concerned, and you have to remember, a lot of our project briefs weren't from the system. We identified these projects from the community and took them to the system. It's very different. We weren't like these organisations that are waiting for the institution to drop a brief. We developed the brief and took the brief to the system. We identified the issues in the locale and went to the system and said, this is what is going on. We need support with this.
What was the response?
It was different. It was at the first it was a little bit wobbly because I wasn't used to it, especially people of colour, developing an entity to rethink research and push cultural knowledge production. But as I always used to say, institutions are evidence-led. They're not intel-led. Centric is about the intel. A man gets shot down the street, that's the evidence. You find out later that Jamal hit my guy's mum, that's the intel. And that's the bit the system misses, and that's what Centric's all about, because we engage people on the ground.
Who are living it.
Who are breathing it every single day. The qualification is this, your experience in your locality. Yeah? We just built from there. Then from that, from the intel gathering, we then we identified nuances such as medical skepticism and this COVID. We started to understand, the black experience in the NHS and everything else was a real problem locally. And a lot of this mistrust, distrust, research weariness was coming from this historical episode in the black nexus, which was having an impact upon people's approach to health. And it just flew from there, looking at health activism, alternative medicines, cultural medicines, entrepreneurship and health, and just nuances that the system had no understanding, were bubbling under their radar. And that's what we're known for now. It's about identifying those nuances below the radar, the nuances that the system doesn't quite pick up. because the system isn't set up to kind of pick up things in that way. You know, it's like hip hop. You know, hip hop is from the underground. You're never going to get Simon Cowell but really making a hip hop tune. He's mainstream. It's not going to happen. Just like an institution, they're not going to come out with the next big thing because they're not situated like that. And I think that's becoming more evident every day. The world's crying for something new, and we're just trying to fill that gap and putting people at the forefront that would never get the chance. And it's lovely to see the reaction of the system when you turn up to a board meeting, a conference. You're turning up almost like Wu-Tang Clan with 30 members just piling in who've all got something to say.
For you though, I know you said about the people with lived experience and that's why it's important. But is there any other reason why it's important to you that those people with lived experience have their voices heard or are doing this sort of work or getting involved in this?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. For me, I am a very big believer in cultural knowledge production. Yeah, cultural knowledge production and the authorship of the people. You know, for too long, we've had other people telling our story. We need to tell it ourselves. And that was quite clear through COVID.
Why?
Yeah, because we understand it. We lived it. We understand the context of the problem. Yeah, we lived and breathed and we felt the pain of it. But for some reason, in some way, somehow, someone else finds their self or their way in to tell our story. We've got to own that. And Centric is all about that cultural knowledge production. Yeah, becoming the producers of our knowledge. Yeah, urban knowledge, black knowledge, however you want to kind of coin it. Because, you know, part of the issue, and this is historic and it's documented, is extraction, research extraction. People for too long, and this is in our literature review 1, all evidence within the literature, people have come and parachuted into communities, taking juicy scoops, and off they go again. And like somebody I spoke to in Brixton, you know, a very profound youth leader who's been working there for 20, 25 years. He said, Shaun, everybody's come in here and made a career. They've got degrees. Journalists have built their houses, you know, so forth. So we haven't even got a piece of paper to say we were here. You know, and it's sad, you know, because our areas are problematic. There are a lot of things that go on. Youth crime, gang culture, you name it. If it's a social ill, it's happening. And people, you know, the system or people from outside that come in and take their thing and off they go. But we're trying to change that around. We're trying to create ownership around the intel. And it's very important as well that the system, that the community have a stake in what's happening. Because if you don't have a stake in something, you might just want to burn it down. You have to remember in any riot, in any situation, the only place that doesn't get touched is a Domino's club. You know that? Because that's where our old folks play Domino's. Yeah? Yeah?
It's true. For you, so you're saying you need to rethink research, and that's a big thing. It's Centric. So instead of these institutions parachuting in and getting off, like you say, why is Centric different? What does it actually do? How do you conduct your research, and how do you involve the community?
It's a really good question. Well, you know, one of the, I think the mottos or part of our ethos is about building research capacity and capabilities at a local level. Yeah, building research capacity and capabilities at a local level. So the first part of the Centric journey is about training, building capacity building, upskilling. Yeah, so it starts with training. Yeah, we training, and also I would say mindset, but we'll come on to that. It starts with training. Yeah, building people's skills up in this thing, which sometimes is quite foreign. But as I was saying to some folks earlier, it's beautiful to get people involved in something. So let me start that again. One of the most beautiful things of Centric is that you engage with people who do not think research is for them. And actually, a lot of those individuals that didn't think research for them have become the best researchers we've got, which says something, right? So the first thing is about empowering, it's about building, it's about upskilling communities in research. But there's a lot of other work that goes on alongside that because the mosaic has been fractured, you see. Someone somewhere has been told they're not good enough. Somebody somewhere has been told they're crap. Someone's self-esteem isn't quite intact. So although you're teaching the skills, there's a lot more to it, should I say, than just teaching skills. It's about building or replacing a lot of those issues that an individual has from the community. Self-esteem, the mindset, the confidence, you know. reshaping the way they think, making sure that when they go into a meeting, they don't need to be afraid. It's about their community. When they're going to meet this person, they don't need to feel insecure. They have the lived experience. And we see this time and time again. There's 30 community researchers in Centric, and with every one of them, there's been that issue. And I always say to people that, you know, this kind of work, taking people on with less experience, it's not for everybody. It's not an easy task. Because it's not just about the work. It's about where that person's coming from. And you've got to be able to manage and facilitate all of that to get their mind right for the job at hand.
And how do you think that, so the initial training, reshaping the way they think, how do you think that then changes the person or makes them now believe, I can do this?
It's like someone that's born again. Yeah? Or reverted because they knew it anyway, but they were just told they didn't. And I think that then sparks a kind of an energy in the individual and a bit of a like, I want to get back at the system because you told me I was so bad. But they're ready because now they've got the knowledge, they've got the confidence, plus they've got the lived, you know, the lived experience and the skills. And these are issues that affect them. So they're committed. You know, it's not like an outsider coming in. And as I always say to people, we're insiders looking out, not outsiders looking in. It's a big difference when you're doing research from within to the out rather than out in. Yeah, people are committed. People want to be part of the legacy. People want to be part of what is sustainable locally. Yeah, and these are, I think, in this time where we are, I think really important. These are really important factors because there's almost like a, not to get over philosophical, but like a authenticity shake-up. Who's real, who's not? You know, when I started, qualifications were the key. You could get through. I'm educated. I'm so clever. I'm going to solve all society's problems. I'm not sure that's the case anymore.
Why do you believe that?
Because I think there's just a different vibe in the air. I think there's a millennial group who are saying it's more than just that. Yeah, the market's become disruptive. You know, there's innovations. There's a guy in the garage that may take you on. Boo-hoo, Amazon proved that. Yeah, and there's a bit much more of a you know, millennials want to know more. They want to know the truth, and it's the age of social media, so information is easier to kind of, you know, access. We've got reparations, payback. We've got research weariness. We've got there's all these kind of things going on, which I think, yeah, there's a requirement for a new approach, and I'm quite, you know, without being too big-headed, arrogant, whatever. Centric's working its way into that, and that's why we've, you know, had an impact not just locally but also globally. You know, we're in Ghana. We've got a 10-man team in Ghana looking at climate action. We've got a 5-man team in Gambia looking at climate action. We've got a team in Dominican Republic. 13 Dominican Republic, again, who thought they couldn't do research, whose skills have been built and ready to kind of jump on initiatives. And it's beautiful to see that, you know, through building this small little project in South London, we'll be able to kind of take that out into the world and tell communities, research is for you. You can do this. Yeah. And people, and I think there's an excitement, there's a buzz, because people want to understand their own knowledge. People want to be at the forefront of what they think is theirs, because I think too long it's been the other way around. So yeah, it's exciting times. It's exciting times, brother. Yeah.
I like that as well. I do think it is a beautiful thing that Centric is doing, and how it has just gone from South London to all around the globe now. But my question is, what do you do then? I know you said a lot of the people who are involved with Centric and part of the team, they didn't believe research was for them. But what do you do with the people that don't think research is for them and just tell you, that's dead, or this ain't gonna work? You know, just got no even. They're not even gonna try. So then, how is there a way of converting their thinking?
It's a very good question. Yeah, I mean? It's a very good question.
Attracting someone,
yeah, it's a very good question.
Into research.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I saw this with the young people. Yeah, like, yo, what's this? What's going on with that? But then we started talking about economics. We started talking about how much money is in research, how much money a local authority gets to bring outsider researchers into the ghetto. We started talking about how much, you know, what the cost of, you know, knowledge, insight, and all these things are. And I think that, you know, that's been a very attractive pull. Yeah, the cost, the economics, the ecosystem. You know, we employ 30 people in South London here. Every day, every month people are earning from research. So there is a kind of almost like a currency, a financial gain in research. I think the other thing which people don't understand, that everything is research. A Nokia phone needed to do research when Apple was growing because it thought it was going to last forever. It didn't. It didn't do its research. It got left behind. Yeah, everything we do revolves research, and I think there is a knowledge crisis. Okay, people have become skeptical of the knowledge in front of them, and they want to know about other. So the whole research sphere agenda has become quite attractive. Everyone wants to jump on the knowledge. Everybody wants to kind of know it for themselves, and that's why we've been able to kind of push this research. As I said, we had a few issues with the youngsters because it was like, I don't want to learn interviews long, da-da-da-da-da. But I think when they realised the economics behind it, it changed their mindset. This is not $1 billion industry, it's $1 trillion industry. Because data is the new oil, and local insights, as we learned from COVID, cannot be ignored. Yeah? Black data was very, very, very important during that period. And I'm not sure if the system really understood or people really respected the power of our contribution. And I think they do now. I think there's a lot of interest, should I say, in local data, in local insight. Most companies that are successful, Nike, Apple, when you dig deep, they've taken the time
to do the research,
to fix into the local community. I always say, and I remember saying this to the health system during COVID and this whole backlash on engaging black communities, research skepticism amongst black communities. I remember saying at a meeting, if you want to learn about the black community, dear doctors, dear medical professionals, you might want to talk to Nike. And they looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, well, no one understands the black community better than Nike. They know what we want before we know what we want. They've got the black culture down to a T. That's data, that's insight. And their whole business model is based upon the authentic narrative. It's based upon authentic storytelling. Yeah? It's all about the data. It's all about the insight. So yeah, we've become attractive, and actually, I like this because there are a lot of. I must admit, there are individuals that I thought would never be interested in research, but when presented to them in a particular way, they just can't get enough of it. It becomes quite contagious because it's about learning, it's about knowledge, it's about empowerment, it's about not having to rely on others to make decisions in your own life. I say to my own children, I don't mind what you do from a point of qualification. Just learn to become a critical thinker so you don't take what's in front of you
just because
it's in front of you. Critical thinking is key. Yeah? It's a survival mechanism. We started this conversation about foundation, and I thank my parents, I thank my family around, because there's many things they may have done or not done, but was one thing they did do. Teach me how to become a critical thinker.
Would you say, do you try and instill critical thinking in everyone that works in Centric?
I try to, yeah. I try to kind of, I have, as I say, I have a degree, two PhDs, sorry, 2 masters and a PhD. And that's not about, oh my God, look at my career, forget that. I'm just talking, I've spent time involved in training, involved in this, and I didn't do those qualifications for me. I've done those qualifications to bring them out to the community, and a lot of that rigorous learning, academic learning, it all boils down to one thing, deadlines, commitment, critical thinking, compare and contrast, analysing, deep diving, reflecting. I try to bring all these aspects to the team, and you can see when the team are learning some of these skills, how empowered they become. We're doing a lot of work at the minute around reflection and reflectivity. It's become a very powerful tool in Centric, and working with partners, working with clients. I remember, without mentioning names, we had a particular issue with one of our clients who we just probably seeing things in a different way. As Jim Collins says, it's not what we want the world to be, it's what the world actually is. And I think sometimes with communities and systems there's this conflict of realities. Yeah? But for me it was about just getting into a room and reflecting. And we called this particular session or this particular program Race and Reflectivity, where the organisation we were working with and the community just came together and reflected. And it was powerful. You saw a shift in individuals' mindsets, in individuals' approaches, because you don't know what you don't know sometimes. And I think when you just bring people into your understanding or the way of you seeing the world, which comes from reflection, reflectivity, it just helps matters. And that's been a real powerful tool for Centric. And I can see individuals in the organisation who have taken it on just boom.
Accelerating.
Yeah. Analysis. Analysing, learning how to analyse, learning how to pull something apart. There were some individuals who came into this organisation probably thought they hated it. You can't stop them doing it. Yeah, and what I find empowering is that people are not only doing this work in Centric, they're taking it into their own life, into their everyday life. How they deal with people in the community, how they deal with people in the bank, in a supermarket, in a situation. I've had people from the team say, you know what, Shaun, thanks for this, because it's helped me deal with my teachers at my children's school. They used to have me like an idiot, but now I understand the system through Centric. I had this situation with X, but now so it's helping people in their everyday life. It's a great thing to see, and that's not just down to me. That's down to all the amazing people I work with. But I think there is something in this rethinking research model that we are saying this is not just for the few. It's for the many. I grew up in a system where it's for the few. I come from a particular area where not many people got to uni. Never mind masters and PhDs, and that's not me saying I'm better than any now. We're the same. But I was lucky, and I took that chance and I seized it, and I never stopped. But then I brought it back, to the people and told them, listen, come and have a go. Come and have some of this because you can do some great things with it. Research it's a powerful tool, and we're seeing that.
Centric now, what does it look like? I know we spoke about the early days, but now, and how long has Centric been around now?
I think nearly 2 years.
So how is it different to the first few months?
Yeah, as I say, when we first started, we had to rag it out. It was meant to be a spin out. We had to rag this thing out. There was a few of us. There's 30 of us now. There's 10 in Ghana. There's 13 in here. There's 50, 60 people across the globe, and it's growing. We get requests all the time. It's a movement. It's a global movement around cultural knowledge production. It's a global movement about empowerment, ownership, having a stake in data, in knowledge. And it's also about building urban confidence, black confidence, black excellence. We can be at the forefront of things. We don't need to be kind of looked after, watched over. We can take care of our own affairs. And that's important. The other bit to this is around collaboration, between different countries, between different races, between different cultures. There's 8 different languages spoken in Centric: Portuguese, Spanish, Yoruba, Tree, you name it, it's there. We've got different subgroups within the Black Nexus, within the organisation: Nigeria, Ghana, Somalia, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and that's beautiful as well. There's almost like a united colours of Centric, never mind Benetton. And it makes it powerful when we attend the meeting or attend the presentation because there's different perspectives.
It's like a team.
It's
together,
like a team.
like togetherness.
Yes, the Centric, the centre of everything, right? That's why I kind of come up with the name. Because I've always felt like that myself. Being from a particular area, particular background, but navigating this space, which I call straddling the paradigms, which is quite difficult. You can't even keep up with the clothes, the dress. You've got to have a bad boy tweed blazer on for the ministers and the high class meetings. You've got to have the baddest Nike Air flight to appease the people on the concrete. It's confusing, but it's tiring, and it's not for everybody. You normally find people that are really good and effective in that community space, but sometimes when they get into it becomes a bit tricky. You certainly get people from the institutional space that are not comfortable in community. So when you're straddling the two, you've not got many real people with you. You've got people there. It can become, it can become challenging. But That's what I've signed up to do, and that in a way is, again, it's part of the USP, the unique selling point of Centric.
When you talk about challenges, and again, you spoke about the early days of Centric and how things weren't just sort of ragged out sort of thing. So, and there must have been more challenges along the way up until this point.
Yeah.
How do you view them?
I view them, they're in different ways. You've got challenges in the community, all right, because you've got community members for all of the right reasons, maybe suspicious of institutions, and they see you as part of the institution. You've got institutions that see you too entrenched in the community and become suspicious. So managing those dynamics is complex. You've also got individuals in the organisation that may have suffered at the hands of institutions and feel quite resentful. You find it's definitely in the health and medical space. To some of the projects we're doing, it's managing that. But you've also got community members, that are quite, that have issues amongst each other from different parts of the community, from a point of culture, race, religion, and religious quasi. It plays out. So you're kind of in the middle, managing all those various dynamics. That's hard. And you've got people sometimes who might have different objectives as to why they're here with you, and because not everybody's the same. So it's trying to find that happy medium, and that comes from the setting of the sail. Jim Rowan says, "Don't blame the winds, don't blame the government, set the sail." Yeah, and I think for me as a leader of an organisation, it's about ensuring that I set the sail and I set the direction. And that direction is to really become an entity that when institutions, governments, whatever it might be, think of community. They think of a particular way of doing research, not just this add-on or not just this side dish. Yeah, let's get some community members to run around and collect some data. I'm very, very, intentional about suggesting what Centric is and what Centric's not. Centric is a strategic kind of framework to build capacity and capability of local people. What it's not is a glorified black data collection agency for the system anytime they need black people. Yeah? Yeah.
Glad you mentioned Jim Rohn there, because it reminded me of something you said before this podcast. You told me that there's certain institutions that will want to take people from here to here. Yeah. You want to take the people from right over here to this point now.
Yes.
And Jim Rohn said something like, "Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better."
Of course.
So why is that important for you to not just, this is the easy route, just to take them to here? Why is it important for you to come from all the way here or down there or however you want to see it to here now or to up here now?
Because brother, the other part to that Jim Rohn is don't wish it was easy, get better. Don't wish for less problems, learn more skills. Yeah, Jim. That's the second part. But I'm a great believer in trajectory, distance travelled. I always have been. Don't ask me what I do. I'll bore you. Ask me where I've been. Ask me where I've been. I'll excite you. Yeah, the trajectory. What's your distance, kid? Where have you come from to where you're going? And I think I'm quite, rightly or wrong, quite obsessed with that distance travelled. And I'm interested in people that have travelled a long distance as an individual. And I've tried to bring that to my business. And everybody I've started here and now they're here because it's in my bloodstream. I started here and now here. So I try to bring that within the business and find things for individuals to kind of help them excel to that place. And not everything within research is for everybody. Some people are amazing at analysis but can't stand interviews. Some people are amazing at interviews and can't stand analysis, so forth and so on. And that's challenging, but it's also quite joyful when you find somebody who don't think they're good because they've been shown this, but you show them that, shoom, and off they go.
In a way, that's great though. Because then you've got someone who might not be great at interviews, someone who's good at analysis. You know what I mean? You got the analysis person, you got the interview person, and now bang, the whole company's people are doing what they're good at. And my own experience of working in institutions and local authorities, it wasn't really there was quite pigeonholed. You were there, and if you weren't good, you were told you were bad. But that's not true. We learn, we take in information in very different ways. And I want to set up a culture. Yeah, an organisational culture which kind of accommodates all of that.
It's not perfect. There's still work to do, but that's the vision. This stuff is not perfect. It's not complex. And I was always saying to the team, don't worry about it because no one's got the holy grail of these problems. We're still here. You know, Marvin Gaye released What's Going On in 1972. We're asking the same question in 2003. What the hell's going on? So, you know, kick yourself. Don't kick yourself that much because no one's worked it out yet. But we're having a go.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that when the right people, regardless of where they come from, are given an opportunity and a chance, how much they can excel. Because an empty stomach is a creative mind. When you're hungry, your brain, your mind, your whole thing's different. And we've got a lot of individuals that we brought on with empty stomachs and got extremely creative minds, and they have helped push Centric to another level. That's why we're global, based upon the people we brought in to kind of provide that different paradigm. It's about paradigms, how you see things. You know, there's two guys looking at purple. One's colourblind, one can see. They're looking at the same colour, but they see it very different. And that's become clear in Centric. Yeah, you know, those who see it different, and when you give them an opportunity, boy, well, you know, yeah.
And just to conclude, I'd like to ask you. So now, Centric is where it is, doing great work.
Yeah.
What's next? What's the
Cen Alliance? Yeah, Cen Alliance is on the agenda. When I first started this journey around rethinking research, reimagining research, I thought it was all about academia, academic rigor, changing the lesson style, changing the all that kind of. And that's very important. You know, accessible learning, palatable learning, developing learning in a different way. It's important. But I learned, this has been part of my learning, in order to really rethink this, to really reimagine this, you've got to consider innovation. Because our community are amazing innovators, but things tend to bounce off the system or don't stick. Or usually we get extracted. So Cen Labs is all about community innovation and pushing that forward. I also learned that in 2023 you cannot attempt or won't get very far with thinking about research without thinking about technology. I'm useless at tech, but I know how to broker. And I think it's paramount with things like the metaverse, blockchain, and everything Web3 going on in our society and across the globe, that we are involved in that space. And I gave a presentation to a group of techies quite recently. And I said, I was very clear from the outset, I am useless at tech. But I'm here today to talk about an expertise I've developed over the last 15 years around distrust. The distrust nexus and the black experience, so forth and so on. So there's a lot of conversation going on with myself and others around tech and technology, distrust, black experience, how to bring people from communities into tech, building their capacity in tech, so forth and so on, research, apps, you know, savvy ways to collect data, to do you name it, we were involved in it. Tech is key. The metaverse, I've had colleagues testing things, going into the meta. Is it that we go there soon as Centric and start interviewing avatars? Who knows? But it's happening, it's there. We don't want to miss out. Because one thing I do also know and recognise, we're always the last to know and the first to be blamed. And I don't want to see much more of that. I want our people to be involved when it's current, not just when it's at the end. The fourth part is the youth of the future. Cen Ethics is about young people and research. Yeah. Then we've got Cen Giving, which is a charity arm based, as I say, we're doing charity in Ghana, South Africa, Dominican Republic. The philanthropy is key. And there's a whole reparations space at the minute, which we're heavily involved in. I want to get involved in designing frameworks in order that money goes back to the black community in the way it should, and that black people are involved in the decision-making process. Also key is key. Cen Training. We've been inundated with people wanting to buy into the Centric training packages. We start to sell them. I'm a great believer in products to market. You know, most of our income stream is through the product. I'm not a great fan of bids and everything else. I think there's something about communities coming together, building products and taking them to market. And I talk about the team all the time. What we've got there with those things is what I describe as the urban ecology. It's an ecosystem. You know, people talk a lot about sustainability, legacy building, ra-ti-ta-ti-ta. It's great. But I think we need to really take it on and own that. And our vision for Centric is to build this ecology where a man can come in, or a woman can learn innovation, they can learn tech, they can learn research and be somebody, be part of something, which is a benefit to them and the communities that they're a part of. So there's going to be a lot of work, a lot coming out around Cen Alliance and ecology and ecosystem and just really looking at. I almost see this as almost like the future of community development. Yeah, I can't see it really any other way. This drip for drop thing that happens, I'm not sure it benefits our community the way it should. I think it's about ecosystems, economic development, power base, foundation, building skills in these communities so they can stand upright and make decisions and go forward the way they should. Because we look at community from a point of deficit too much. There's a lot of jewels and precious material below, and we've got to start understanding our community from a point of equity, not deficit. So, cinema coming near you or near you coming cinema. Cen Alliance.
Love that, man. But 100% powerful. I just want to say, yeah, I agree. Exciting times.
Yeah.
And I just think just more to come now.
Yeah.
Where's that growth and how we're going to grow now. And it's just exciting, even with the podcast, to be involved in that. And obviously now, this isn't it. This is the introduction podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to do podcasts on the projects going on.
Yes.
The lit reviews
Yes.
and everything. You know what I mean? And individual ones. And you know what I mean? Podcasts with the team. And so just great, man. And I just think, excited times ahead, and let's go. Like, there's no time to stop.
No.
Run momentum.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
Yeah. And just, just the last point, and it's, I sat here, going on about how great we are and what this and that, but it's not smooth. It's complex. There's lots of ups and downs. It's a roller coaster ride. It is certainly a Alton Towers trip. But that's what makes it joyful. That's what makes it
the journey.
The journey, Never said it was going to be easy. But another Jim Rohn quote that I live by, and it's helped me with my own life, is price and promise. We've got to believe in the promise if we're going to pay the price. Yeah, this is not about optimism. This is about heightened optimism. And again, going into the literature, there's a very, very powerful book called Man's Search for Meaning, and it's about the concentration camps. Yeah, and he talks about those who had hope. Those who had hope were dead, but it was those who knew, who were certified in their own mind and had that heightened optimism that one day things were going to get better. And it's something I wake up with every day in regards to Centric. I don't hope Centric becomes good or does important things or is impactful. I know, with confidence that it will. And as it gets rough, tough and complex, that's what keeps me kind of grounded and knowing that better days will come. And here we are. So let's see.
100%. And I think that's a great way to end this one. And I just want to say thank you.
No, thank you.
For sitting down and better things to come, man. And anyone listening, thank you as well. And hopefully you've been touched by this. And come and join us. You know what I mean? Let's talk. But
thank you.
Finish it there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Respect, brother.
Cen X, real talk
at the heart of your community.